All right, Jake, so imagine you're a football team grinding all year long. You finally get your bowl bid at the end of the season. You're going to the Bahamas Bowl. Everybody's excited. You get to take a little Caribbean vacation. Not so fast because there are renovations going on in the stadium in the Bahamas. So now you get to play in Charlotte, North Carolina. How are you feeling?
First off, Charlotte's a great city, so this is no knock on Charlotte, but I would be devastated. If you don't make it to the playoff or the New Year's Six Bowl, I don't know that there's a bowl I'd rather play in than the Bahamas Bowl. I had a buddy that was at Marshall, went to high school together, one of my longtime friends. He went to the Bahamas Bowl, went to a couple bowl games. I've only heard stories from the Bahamas Bowl because it was that good. Get some sunshine. Wouldn't that be nice?
Yeah, I mean, you can get, at that point in the game, either the Bahamas Bowl, which would be a fun one to go to, spend a little week down there, or you get the Pinstripe Bowl. Go to New York where it's cold as hell in the middle of the winter.
Still cool experience, though. I've heard great things about that. You know what? I forgot. I'm talking to a guy that thinks New Jersey, which is right there knocking on the door to New York, worst 50th out of 50 states in the country, right?
It's yes, very close.
Why'd I ask you? I should have known.
Between New Jersey and Indiana for worst state in America. This is Red Corner, Blue Corner right here on Stadium. That is the Michigan Wolverine, Jake Butt, great player, Mackey Award winner for the best tight end in the country, All-American twice over and a captain of the Wolverines.
Man, this is Joshua Perry, national champion, Ohio State Buckeye, also a captain, NFL linebacker, college great, and my co-host here on Red Corner, Blue Corner.
And we're excited to bring you in as well. Our show thrives when you guys are active, so go ahead and get in that YouTube chat. Let us know what you want to talk about today. And we also have the QR code on the screen that you can scan to vote in today's poll. Question is, who will win the Big Ten West? We ain't got no damn idea, but we will certainly take you through that later on in the show. Now, we made some picks on Thursday. I'd like to take you through them. Wasn't the best week ever. Everyone picked Maryland and got that wrong. Huge upset for Northwestern. T-Bob, however, won the week. That was the only pick that he got wrong. He got Tennessee as a winner. Jake and I went 3-2, and now for the season, I am 19-7. Not that bad. Jake, 16-10.
Not that bad. I'm within striking distance, okay? Do you feel good? Because I'm within striking distance. You don't have a lot of room for error.
Yeah, I don't swing and miss nearly as badly as you do on the picks, so I'm feeling all right.
Hey, I'm gonna bounce back. One of those weekends should have been mine. We should have bet against the standard there. If we would have taken Northwestern, I tried a couple of those picks and I lost.
I thought about it, but neither here nor there.
All right, neither here nor there. Where you were was over there in Wisconsin. That's for our game of the week, of course, as Ohio State took on the Badgers, and the Buckeyes rolled past the Badgers for the 24-10 win. One thing I think we were both encouraged by was seeing TreVeyon Henderson play up to his standard. 162 yards and 1 touchdown on the day. Joshua, what's the difference for this Ohio State offense when TreVeyon Henderson is 100% healthy?
It's a huge difference. I don't know if it can be stated enough. We have been on this program, and I have talked about that being the missing piece. Everybody's like, oh, the offensive line isn't playing all that well. I have said to you, I think the offensive line is playing fine. It's certainly not great, but they're not a terrible offensive line like some people try to make it out to be. I thought that the running backs were doing all that they could without TreVeyon Henderson, but they were missing a guy who had that elite next gear. I have done this many times on the show. In college football, sometimes the gaps don't stay open like this. Sometimes they go like this. You know who fixes that? TreVeyon Henderson.
Yeah.
He can hit him, and then he's up on the second level. Good luck tackling that dude when he's got a full head of steam.
And part of that is it's his burst as well. The key to me, and the question is 100% healthy, because he's been judged when he's been less than 100% healthy. And you know what? That's fair. We get judged on what we put on tape, but he hasn't been 100% healthy. He had some extra juice that week. Another area that opens up holes is patience in the backfield. Le'Veon Bell did this with the Steelers all the time. There's a hole here, but a good back knows how to dance and jump cut to open that hole up before you hit it with the burst. TreVeyon Henderson does that as well. his ability to catch the ball out of the backfield. Football is a game of matchups. That's another added element. And to summarize this whole thing, the key for the Buckeye offense as a whole, I think we saw a huge example of this. McCord was caught staring down Marvin Harrison Jr. a little too much this past weekend. So when you have a good running back, that takes the pressure off of him to not have to do that continually.
I agree with you on that. I think having the run game as somewhere where he can get relief is big. Marvin Harrison Jr., who we'll talk about in a second, was huge, but Kyle McCord had some moments where he was trying to force feed him the football, and I don't know if that's going to be a great game plan into the future, but things that give me a little bit of hope about this offense and their continuation. Number one, Emeka Egbuka was available to play. They decided they did not need him. He did not play in that one. Certainly takes pressure off of Marv. And then a young guy in Carnell Tate. Not a lot of people are talking about him. He's a freshman. He's been getting more and more reps week by week. And by the end of the year, he could be more of a feature within that offense.
I know they're really excited about Tate. I mean, they talk about him like he's the next all-time great, so that'll be fun to watch. But let's talk about the all-time great right here, Marvin Harrison Jr. Another big game for him, 123 yards, 2 scores. It's now at the point, Joshua, where we have to ask, should he be getting more Heisman consideration than he is?
Yes, 100%. I don't, like, at this point in the year, I think that we've seen Marvin Harrison Jr. and particularly in some tough situations. Against Penn State, it felt like he was the only option offensively at times, and he rose to that occasion. Against Wisconsin, when they needed to get that offense jump-started, you know who they really went to? Trey, of course, huge in that. They were giving the ball to Marv. And so for me, I look at him as a guy who has an elite skill set. He has shown that he can catch contested balls. He is a guy who is not afraid to catch the ball going across the middle of the field. And the other thing for me, and I had said this early on in the year, I was not a fan of this guy's releases. At the line of scrimmage, I thought if you could get him in press coverage, you could disrupt him enough that he would not be able to get through the top end of his route by time the quarterback needed the ball to be out of his hands. He has improved in that regard. In his releases and his ability to win at the line of scrimmage, he has improved. There are a handful of standout players right now, and every time we need to have that conversation, Marv has to be in there.
Man, when you talk about his releases, I remember you mentioned this to me last year. That's not a weakness. In fact, it's a strength of his, and I think that showed up big against Penn State, where Manny Diaz wanted to get them in press coverage. He had such patient releases, but it's not just that. It's his understanding of the route concept as a whole and where the open space is. You don't just want to get to that space now. You have to get to that space within the timing. What makes him so special, man, there's a few of those catches, the one in the end zone, a couple down the sideline. You shouldn't make those. You shouldn't have that awareness and grip strength and then combine it into one. That dude is absolutely spectacular. So as far as the Heisman conversation goes, Devontae Smith was the last wide receiver to win the Heisman. Their stats, though Marvin is having an explosive season, the stats, Devontae Smith through 8 games has him by about 200 more yards and 4 more touchdowns. So certainly Marv is capable of exploding down the stretch of the season to make it more interesting.
Yeah, I mean, for this conversation, too, there's a game at the end of November everybody's going to be watching, and I'm sure JJ squarely going to be in the Heisman conversation. Yes. Marv will be there, and I think that game would probably decide who a lot of people put where on their ballots. But we got to switch this conversation over from some good football that we saw out of Ohio State to some nasty football over there in the West. That loss by Wisconsin, coupled with a few other results from the weekend, has thrown the race for the Big Ten West title into chaos. 4 teams, Minnesota, Iowa, Wisconsin, and Nebraska, are all tied for the division lead at 3-2, while Northwestern stays in the running just a game behind all of them. Jake Butt, who do you trust most out of this group?
Who do I trust most? So I was kind of wrestling with this, because what does trust mean? I trust you if I can, what I expect you to do, you do considerably. So I know who Iowa is. I trust them to be Iowa down the stretch of the season. That is not my pick. I just want to see what face he made. Who do I trust the most? I trust Wisconsin, but really what I'm saying is I trust Luke Fickell because he's been there before. He's led a team to the college football playoff. I think they've gotten considerably better week over week, and that matters in the context of it's a brand new head coach, brand new offensive and defensive scheme. They've gotten better. Now, the injuries in the backfield are certainly something to watch out for, but again, I trust that they'll be able to overcome that because of their head coach, Luke Fickell.
Yeah, you know, I would go with them as probably the team I trust the most. I'll throw one in here as well. Do you trust Northwestern? And what I mean by that is, do you trust them to fight and compete hard every game? Do you trust teams to underestimate them week in and week out? I know we do it as analysts. We act like these guys don't have a damn shot. And they're looking at a potential case of being bowl eligible by the end of the year. I'm not exactly sure that they're going to win this thing, but when you talk about trustworthy, when you talk about meeting expectations week after week, they pushed Penn State early on in that game. People don't talk about that all that much. We saw what they did over the weekend, taking a Maryland team that is dangerous and exposing every pain point Maryland had. None of us expected that. I think I trust them to make these games a lot messier than they have been.
I can't believe this conversation. I completely agree. This conversation should be heating up. Like, in terms of who's the next head coach going to be, I'm shocked it's just not David Braun written in Sharpie, period. What he has done with this program, given everything that's went on, is nothing short of spectacular. If they had 0 wins at this point in the season, non-story, no blame, all good. And yet here we are talking. Do they have a chance to win the West? It's absolutely remarkable. Well, if we said who we trust the most, let me ask you, who do you trust the least?
Okay, so this one is a little bit unfair, and it's going to feel like I'm taking shots here. But I'm going to say Iowa. I trust Iowa the least out of this scenario. Here's the reason why. I saw them against a good team in Penn State. Couldn't even stay on the same field, right? Like, and this was before they had all those injuries. Bad team. They are deficient completely in one area of their roster, and that is on offense. Special teams have been great. The defense is amazing. Phil Parker, coach of the year, every single year in this conference. But the idea that they had a game where they had the lead and they couldn't score a singular point in the second half, while the other team could only kick field goals, and they had to rely on their special teams, and a fluke call happened, and it took the points off the board and they lost. I refuse to trust this team. I think they got as good of a shot as anybody in the West to win it, but I'm not trusting them.
It's really hard for me to argue with your logic there, and I think one of the reasons I'm going to go a different direction and pick Minnesota as a team I trust the least is because of Iowa's offensive struggles. Well, Minnesota's struggled offensively too. They're one of the worst teams in the country, but the scheduling is what matters. You still have to go on the road to play Ohio State. It's hard for me to trust you with that challenge. And historically speaking, even with where Iowa's at right now, they've proven to me that they can overcome and win. Whereas Minnesota, even in good positions at times, the Gophers have dropped games they never should have dropped, and that's proved to be costly in the Big Ten West race.
I feel you on that. I think the thing that we have drawn a conclusion to here is I don't trust nobody, really.
Are we forgetting something right now? You guys think we'd go a whole show without talking about the Michigan Wolverines, without talking about Jim Harbaugh? Don't worry, we've got that for you guys. We got the latest from Anna in Ann Arbor. That's next here on Red Corner, Blue Corner. Stick around. All right, welcome back to Red Corner, Blue Corner, and this is not just the current Big Ten. We got to go out west to check out those future Big Ten teams. Michael Penix Jr. brought that energy. 4 touchdowns, Joshua, as Washington stays unbeaten.
Tell you what, man, Washington's been a little bit of a question mark these last couple of weeks, getting into some battles with a couple of teams that they are much better than, if they really are the 5th best team in the country, as some people want us to believe.
Hey, you got to win the ugly ones. Yep. Sometimes it's not always going to be perfect, and they've stayed perfect from the record standpoint. How about Oregon? It was the game of the week out in the Pac-12. Oregon on the road in Utah, and they had no problems.
Yeah, I feel like Oregon was going to be able to stop Utah's offense. I didn't think they were very good. I was shocked by how many points Oregon could put up on that Utah defense. So Bo Nix got to be in that Heisman conversation.
Certainly, certainly. And if they keep winning, that conversation will heat up. Cal playing USC. They got a chance to win it with a 2-point try, and they miss. USC survives a scare from the Bruins.
Stinky. That's all I got.
Stinky. Excuse me, from the Bears, right? UCLA's defense kept Colorado in check. Big piece of that was the offensive line. Dion, you said it. Joshua, reaction?
Well, I like UCLA. I like the way they're playing ball. We got to talk about this Colorado offensive line at some point, though.
Yeah, we only got 30 minutes, so we're going to have to try to find a way to summarize it.
We might do it in the conference clash coming up.
General theme, not great. Not great.
Yeah, well, all right. Let's move on from that one, get back to the current Big Ten teams here as we welcome you back to the set of Red Corner, Blue Corner. We got to talk about Michigan and everything that's going on there. Your alma mater was on a bye week, and it lowered the temperature stemming from the sign-stealing investigation. Now there are conflicting reports out there about Jim Harbaugh's contract extension. Now, he said that the way it was characterized, and one of the reports that was out last night, is not necessarily accurate. I think we probably both agree that you have to take it off the table at least until the dust settles here, but it's not to say that they aren't engaged and the contract might not be imminent once they get some more clarity on this. But regardless of the status of his contract, is Jim Harbaugh's future still in Ann Arbor?
You know, this has been a storyline every single offseason, right? And I think it's a credit to how good of a coach he is. You know, people give him slack at times. I don't know that there's a program in the NFL or college that wouldn't be really damn happy if Jim Harbaugh led their team. My personal opinion is I think Jim wants to be somewhere that he's loved and respected and compensated for his work and efforts. With that in mind, I think Jim would sign a lifetime contract with Michigan. Of course, everything going on right now muddies the water. So as far as, his future in Ann Arbor, it's really hard to say with the lack of clarity we have regarding on what's going to be the potential consequences of the sign stealing.
Yeah, I'm conflicted on this because I certainly do agree with you on the idea that Jim Harbaugh loves Michigan. He would like to be the coach of Michigan, and the things that he's done over the last few seasons at the University of Michigan have been phenomenal. I mean, it's returned back to the prominence of what people expect from that brand. At the same time, it feels like there is a constant tension back and forth between Jim Harbaugh and the NCAA, and that's not something you worry about in the pros. It seems to me that there is also consternation among some of the decision makers of that university in their tolerance level for Jim Harbaugh and who he is to his core and how he behaves at times. And I'm not exactly sure that's something that he feels comfortable about. The one thing I keep going back to, though, is every time we think Jim's going to do something, he does something completely different. So a lot of people thinking that he's going to go to the NFL probably means that he's going to be in Ann Arbor for a very long time.
It's a fair point, man. Jim, Coach Harbaugh, there's one thing that we do know. And it's that we don't know.
We don't know.
So we shall see. It seemed before all this that he was in a great place with his players, his staff, and loves the program. Of course, now we got a lot of other things to consider.
I think he's still in a great place with the players and the staff, and he loves the program. It's just all the external now that's muddy in the waters.
Right. Okay. So that's the big-time storyline. We checked that box. You know we're going to touch on it. But we have another storyline out in the Big Ten West, and that includes a change of venue for a couple teams. Iowa will take on Northwestern this Saturday at Wrigley Field. And here's a fun fact for you, Joshua. The point total for that game opened at 29.5. The lowest ever in FBS history. For context, Washington and USC play this weekend. That point total opened at 76. Okay, Iowa Northwestern, over under 29.5. Joshua, What way are you leaning?
I'm going to take the over. I know it sounds crazy, but I feel like this is just like stupid low. And I feel like this is a game where we might see some crazy things happen. Multiple defensive scores, special team score, something to that nature that puts it on the side of the over. This is nasty behavior, though. I just want to make that clear.
And I will say it's a tough matchup because Northwestern throws the ball a lot. Like 2/3 of their production come from throwing the ball. That plays into Iowa's favor. Here's another fun fact, though. Iowa has broken the record now. This will be the 4th time in their past 12 games for over/under. So back last year, there was an over/under versus Minnesota.
Yep.
That was at 31.5. Another one at 31.5. And versus Minnesota again at 30.5. So Iowa is continually breaking their own record, but it's kind of trending in the wrong direction if you want to score points.
Yeah, it's a tough one. I will say this, though, is, and you've mentioned this before, I think that there is something endearing about a Big Ten game in November that is one where points are tough to come by. It's just the idea that it's the ineptitude on some of the coaching that makes the points hard.
One more quick
by.
fact. So I mentioned all those, they broke their own record. All 3 of the previous games went under.
All right, so I'm definitely taking the over on this one. All right, we're going to take a break right here in red corner, blue corner. But coming up, you know what time it is. We got our guys in from Rivals Down South. They're here for a conference clash. Find out if they side with the players or with the coaches. That's coming up on the other side.
A loss is a loss. What's disappointing is that we didn't do the things that we're capable of. We missed opportunities. And as I said, players have to play better, coaches have to coach better.
As a football coach, you lose a lot of good players a year ago. You think as a coach you're gonna replace them. We obviously haven't.
The big picture, you go get new linemen. That's the picture, and I'm gonna paint it perfectly.
All right, time for the conference clash over here on Red Corner, Blue Corner. We got T-Bob, A-Bear, and SEC Mike in the house. And you just heard from three coaches right there. Mike Loxley from Maryland, Coach Prime for Colorado, and Pat Narduzzi, the coach of Pitt, who got their tail whooped by Notre Dame over the weekend. All of them were pointing the finger at some players. Hey, our players got to play better. And if they can't play better, damn it, we'll find some new ones. I mean, whose side are we on, players or coaches?
I don't hate the Loxley quote because I just feel like all he asked him to do was play better, right? Whereas the other two quotes are basically saying the guys I got aren't good enough. However, there's a crucial difference between Prime and Narduzzi, right? Look at the player reaction. I went and favorited all the quote tweet from Pitt players that were basically taken aback to read this from Narduzzi. If there's one thing about Deion, he's kept it real the entire time. Like, this has been the message from day one. So if you want to yell about a double standard or whatever, that's the crucial difference to me. Narduzzi's players felt blindsided because Narduzzi's saying something different in private. Deion, this is just him continuing what he said since he showed up and said he's bringing Louis with him.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you there. I think the Narduzzi quote had a little bit more on the back end that he took some more responsibility for it. I think it was a nasty quote to begin with from the idea that he hadn't had that conversation. I think Deion, to your point, has been very open about it. I also think it's nasty business out of Deion because I'm looking at some of what Colorado's doing. And I'm not a guy who played on the offensive line, but, as a linebacker, I like to understand protection so I can see where I can get in on the blitzes. These dudes don't know what they're doing in protections, like basic stuff. And to me, instead of saying that, hey, we need to just go get new players, which he probably needs to upgrade there, you probably need to find a new offensive line coach too, because those guys are poorly coached. It's crazy.
It's never just on one person. So I think when you make a statement placing a lot of blame on the players, you're kind of like throwing the towel in on the season because you're just saying, you know what, you guys aren't good enough, that we have to wait for new players to come. I think a good leader can know that to be a true thing and say, hey, it's on me. I have to get these guys to play better and take that responsibility, especially as a head coach. You want to take some pressure off the players. But look, the truth is the truth. Like, it wasn't good enough for any of these teams. So that's not necessarily a lie. It's just how a head coach goes about it.
And real quick, before I toss it back to you guys, I did play for a coach in college who at one point publicly called our wide receiver room a clown show. So I totally get the idea of putting pressure on the players, but you got to call them clowns in private if you're going to do it in public too.
Speaking of clown shows, it's now time for Rivals Down South. Little SEC action. Shout out to the Red Corner, Blue Corner boys. Stick around here for a second guys, we're here at it, baby. We are on the edge of our first college football playoff rankings. We have our latest AP rankings, top 5, no surprise. UGA 1, Michigan 2, Ohio State 3, Florida State 4, Washington 5. Now, clearly, we've seen over time these things have a way of working themselves out. However, these conversations are interesting because every year it seems like the committee kind of has a little different parameters that they're putting weight on, that they're evaluating when it comes to ranking these things. And if you really stop and think about this top 4, I could go a ton of different directions with this. So, Joshua, we'll start with you and Jake here. How much difference do you expect in tomorrow's CFP rankings versus what you're seeing out of the AP right here?
Yeah, I think the most interesting thing to see tomorrow is what they do with Georgia and Michigan. And I think Georgia certainly has played some better competition as of late, and they've stomped them. But it's not like they've played a murderer's row. Michigan really hasn't played a lot of people either. But we know they're two really good teams. So early on, we'll figure out how much they value eye test over resume. Same thing with Ohio State. You can make the argument based off of some of their wins that they would have the best resume. I don't think any of us believe that they're the best team. Now, this isn't necessarily a this week thing, but one thing that I do think will be interesting is the Washington-Oregon thing. If I was ranking them right now, I would actually put Oregon above Washington, even though Washington has the head-to-head. And here's the reason why. Is I think we can point to a couple of scenarios in that game against Washington where Oregon lost it for themselves. But since that game, I have more belief in what Oregon's doing than what we have seen out of Washington these last couple of weeks. They've gotten into games with people that shouldn't even be playing with them, and this is not unprecedented. We saw this in 2021 with Michigan State and Michigan. Michigan State had the head-to-head, but after a couple of rankings, that thing flip-flopped because we knew Michigan was a better team.
You know, I think it's the interesting thing is for me is on that conversation line, how much do you value home field advantage? Because you could say if it's Oregon, Washington, and Oregon's the home team, I mean, I don't think anyone would be shocked to say, well, I think Oregon would win that one. What has been frustrating for me with the committee's philosophy is I think they've contradicted themselves even within each individual season. So what I would be hopeful of is the committee clearly outlines why they made certain decisions. It doesn't go back on that. I do think if you're talking about resume, Ohio State, they could be number one. They very much could be number one. And if they are, that tells you something about the way the committee's viewing this.
Look, I think that kind of malleability by the committee, I don't think that's a bug. I think that's like by design, right? I don't think they want exact parameters. They want to be able to massage this thing. Mike, help me out here, dude. Surely the football has to matter at some point. Tell me you're not an Oregon over Washington boy as well.
Yeah, let's just throw all these games out. What are we talking about? You sound like an AD who's giving out these crazy contracts. No, the games have to matter. But whatever the committee says, it's a bunch of BS. It's just a TV show. They're trying to get you to tune in. But I will say this: Georgia #1 right now in both the polls. I think they're closer to #5 than they will be #1 in the debut college football playoff poll because they don't have the resume. I'm not saying they won't be there at the end, but they have not earned that top billing, and I think they'll be 3 or 4. I really do.
So can I jump in real quick with the games mattering thing? Because I do think games matter. I'm not trying to erase games. This is an interesting one for you all to think about. So Louisville beats Notre Dame, right? Then they turn around, they lose to Pitt. What did Notre Dame do to Pitt over the weekend? Right, and you could make an argument that Notre Dame is a better team than Louisville because of the stretch of the schedule that they were in, having played undefeated, ranked teams in night games back to back to back. And so my whole idea is I think that the game should inform decision making, but I think we can also read into what happens in these games and make a decision about how we feel about a team. That's all. So
that is a very solid argument. I look forward to watching you on the committee here in a few years. That's the exact sort of mental gymnastics that we need on the committee. I would say this. The only difference there, I would say, is that like when I look at Oregon Washington's road up to this point, maybe the Utah win is the first time where Oregon could have something that they could hang their hat on over Washington, but it's been maybe more similar than that of Louisville and Notre Dame. Here's what I would say, too. These things have a way of working their way out. And at this point in the year, I talked to Jordan Rogers earlier, and I'll take this from him because I think it was pretty spot on. It's like, at this point in the year, I would rather reward resume than eye test, right? Because, like, the eye test teams, they're going to have a chance to build that resume. Yep. So if I'm doing these rankings, I don't know the exact order, but I'm putting Ohio State, Florida State, and Washington all above Georgia and Michigan, and I'll let Georgia and Michigan earn their way up, you know, with Mizzou this weekend and then Michigan with the obvious, the 2 Big Ten matchups coming up. All right, boys, thank you so much. Remember, we're going to be back live 2:20 Eastern tomorrow to give you our final preview of the rankings. It's going to be so much fun. This entire playoff year, having the 2 shows cross-pollinate, it's going to be a great time. Huge shout-out. Thank you, Josh Perry. Thank you, Jake. But y'all have an excellent day. Remember, youtube.com/Watch Stadium if you want to get involved. Matt Goldman says Ohio State 1, UGA 2, Michigan 3, FSU 4. Let's look, Mike, at our SEC scoreboard as all the favorites took care of business, including your Tennessee Volunteers. Mike, oh ye of little faith, my dog, I told you what was going to happen in Lexington at night. Mark Poops doesn't beat good SEC teams. And Tennessee may not be great, but Tennessee is a good SEC team. And lo and behold, your Volunteers go into Kentucky and come out with a big win.
Well, I learned long ago, T-Bob, don't bet on the Vols, bet against them, and you'll be happy one way or another. I mean, they just dominated on the line of scrimmage against a Kentucky team that's supposed to be their DNA. That's supposed to be their bread and butter. Tennessee went in there, took their soul. Mark Poops, as you call him, going for it early on 4th and short, get stuffed at home. The game was basically over at that point because you knew Tennessee was going to be dominant on that line of scrimmage. They went for over 230 rushing yards. And, man, Tennessee's back, baby. We got Georgia coming up in Neyland Stadium. That, to me, seems like a winnable game. Still got that incredibly difficult Missouri road trip upcoming. But I think Tennessee splits those two, and you have yourself one hell of a season.
Well, and look, some people will maybe want to have this conversation from the Kentucky standpoint, and I just don't know that I care that much, right? Because I feel like Kentucky's kind of who they've always been. I will say this, shocking stat of the day, if you would have told me that Devin Lear was going to throw for 372, I probably would have told you that I thought that Kentucky won that game. But again, you hit the nail on the head there, Mike, where this is a Tennessee team that you got to approach from a big picture standpoint, okay, right? They don't have the quarterback to win the SEC East this year. They don't have the quarterback to win an SEC championship, but this is a Tennessee team that, I mean, you're clearly a scarred man. For 15 years, you had to watch one of the, former great powers just fall on their face and fail you consistently. And so, yeah, Heupel had a great year last year, but it's just one season, right? Like, Tennessee's whole goal this season had to be proving sustainability. And so when I see them not have the best quarterback, but when I see them shut down that Ray Davis rushing attack, 72 yards on 24 carries, that's just 3 per. And then they run for 253 on 47 over 5. Like, that's dominance in the trenches. From a big picture standpoint, this is a Josh Heupel program that is proving that, yeah, they can be a 10-win team, and they can be closer to breaking into the tier of Alabama, LSU, Georgia than they are to being, stuck in the muck of Ole Miss, Mizzou, Kentucky, Florida, A&M, the kind of purgatory club. However, you say Georgia. I think for Tennessee, Mike, I think everything hinges on that Mizzou game because that could put you at 9-3, chance to win 10 games of the bowl game. And if you just think to where you were 3 or 4 years ago, that is a drastic climb.
Yeah, no doubt. And Joe Milton, we say he's not the guy, which clearly he's not up to this point. But he has played back-to-back his best games of the season, and both of them been on the road, once against Bama, and then obviously last week against Kentucky. T-Bob, he completed over 85% of his passes. That's the highest mark by a Tennessee quarterback dating back to the 2016 season. So he's playing his best football. Dante Thornton emerging on the outside. Needs some players like at Chaz Nimrod, I believe, had his first touchdown reception of the season. So players are beginning to emerge because we can't just be completely relying on the run game going against Georgia, going against Mizzou. Mizzou's going to score on you. And Georgia is certainly emerging as what they can do on the offensive side. You ain't going to win a 20-point ball game against them. You got to score 30, 35, maybe even 40 points to beat those teams.
Matt Goldman in chat, Kentucky is sneaky good. No, let it be clear that me, T-Bob Hebert, I do not believe this to be the case. They are sneaky okay. Now, Georgia, on the other hand, as you mentioned, Mike, Georgia's coming along a little bit. One of the biggest questions was, what were they going to do? Sans, Brock Bowers, Carson Beck coming home to Jacksonville, and, well, you might as well declare him homecoming king because Beck was excellent. And for the first time, I'm starting to come around to Carson here a bit. I've been a big Georgia doubter. Now, let me give some context. I've said all preseason, all during the year, I think Georgia wins the SEC, but I do not think they're good enough to win a national championship. After watching them do what they did in Jordan-Hare with a little road comeback win, the domination of Kentucky, and now the domination of Florida, which, again, like Kentucky, is not a good team. Do not be fooled by the 5-3 record. I think Florida's going to finish 6-6, but there is an inevitability to Georgia. There's an appreciation here. They're like a fine wine. They just seem to be getting better with a little more time. And Carson Beck seems to be getting more comfortable. And then you got the return of Ladd McConkey, who you almost have to pinch yourself that you have a short white guy named Ladd McConkey who is this good of a wide receiver in the SEC. But that man is explosive, and he looked like himself on Saturday.
Yeah, and I'm not going to try to sit here and take away anything from Georgia because everything you said is right. But I think the critical thing, what you just said, T-Bob, I think Florida's massively overrated. And for some reason, they were getting hyped going into this ball game. I think because Brock Bowers was out and some people were foolish to think Georgia was Brock Bowers and 10 Dwarves or something like that. I mean, they are elite, but I don't think they're. I agree with you. I don't know if they're going to win the national championship. And I'm going to sit here, T-Bob, and I'll tell you their next three: Missouri at home, Ole Miss at home, at Tennessee. They're going to lose one of those games, at least one of those games. I really do think. And I think the one that is most likely, believe it or not, is Ole Miss down in Athens. So I think Georgia, it does not go undefeated. They're still going to win the East. They'll probably win the SEC, but they are not going undefeated. That was more of Florida being massively. They weren't even a ranked team. I don't know why people were getting so excited about them potentially beating the number one team in the country.
No, and I do kind of love the fact that this is a scored first. There was like just a little bit of a tease, just a little tickle. And then Florida revealed their true colors, just like they're going to do over the rest of the course of this season. What it means now is that Georgia's been number one in the AP poll for 20 straight weeks. And math gods alert. You know, the law of averages has a funny way of breaking these streaks right when you get on the edge. Coming up next, let's talk about a championship weekend here in the SEC. 1v2 on both sides of the equation. Who wins? Get your comments in. We'll break it down next on Rivals Down South. Yo, what's happening, y'all? Welcome back to Rivals Down South. Trenton Bradshaw in the chat says, Georgia proved last Saturday they are still the team to beat. Again, I don't know if it was last Saturday alone, but 25 wins in a row will definitely prove that, right? As well as 20 weeks atop the AP poll. But, Mike, what I love now here in the South, it's finally starting to get a bit cold. We're turning the calendar into November. Everything up until this point has been setting the table, cooking the food, getting everything ready. Well, guess what? We're about to cut that turkey open this weekend, okay? And we're going to see who kept it all moist and juicy and who's looking like Clark Griswold out there. And will it be Georgia, Alabama? Who knows? We got a big weekend on tap as on both the East and the West. We're talking about number one versus number two. Let's start with LSU, Alabama, Mike, as we said, it kicking off in a big way. College game day heading back to Tuscaloosa. And here once again, You have a battle of the two teams that have been the most championship relevant in the West in the 2000s, two teams that were both awakened and rejuvenated by Nick Saban himself, and two teams that look as if they will decide the SEC West once again.
Yeah, I mean, is it overly simplistic, T-Bob, to say if it's a high-scoring game, I think LSU can win it? But if it's a low-scoring game, I think that's right where Alabama wants to keep it. You got to force Jalen Milroe to get in a score fest with Jane Daniels. I think that's the key to LSU. But again, Alabama's got one hell of a defense. LSU, I think, has got the best offense in the country. Defense wins championships, but offense can win you a game. So, hey, I'm torn on this one. I could go either way, and I think this is going to be an overtime type game, and that usually does not serve the Tigers too well in Tuscaloosa, if memory serves.
You know what, Mike? I can already feel it in my balls. It's one of those special games where here on a Monday, just the thought of the game starts to tantalize. It starts to excite. It even puts a little pit in your stomach, right? You get a little nervous, but that's what makes this time of year so incredible. So much to be gained, so much to be lost. If you're Brian Kelly right now, and look, let's be clear. There's stuff that the locals are upset about, right? Losing to Florida State the second year in a row, just bad beginning to the season, the second year in a row. A defense that appears to be one of the worst in the entire country. A quarterback room where you are now down to only having the availability of 3 true freshman corners. However, in college football, you have these get out of jail free games, and that's exactly what this is for Brian Kelly. This is a golden ticket, Charlie's grandpa hopping up out of bed and suddenly dancing around and no one questioning why he was laying in bed for so long in the first place sort of game. If Brian Kelly wins for the second year in a row and 2-0's Nick Saban to start his tenure, you're a made man. You're a made man. So a ton of lines. We're going to be breaking it down all week long. Now let's look to the East. We talked a little UGA. Mizzou, though, Mike, I mean, when's the last time do you think Mizzou's been involved in a game this big? At least a decade, correct? Yeah, I mean, the only one I can think of is the SEC championships that they went to. And yeah, that was a decade ago. And, that's why last week, Georgia being doubted, some people making Florida a popular pick for some reason. I don't think they're going to have that motivation. I think it's reversed this week. I think everybody and their mother is going to be picking Georgia at home to just steamroll the Missouri Tigers that have had 2 weeks to prepare. They have to prove it to the conference, to the nation, that this is a legitimate, SEC contender and not just someone that has feasted on, a relatively weak schedule. Even though I disagree with that, they're playing so well. And you got to remember, this Missouri team was the one that pushed Georgia to the limit last season. Georgia's not as good. Missouri's better. All the recipes for a massive, massive upset this weekend in Athens. Yeah, and this is a bit funny because this is not couched in logic. It's just based in irrational sports fans' fear. But I do feel that Mizzou getting so close last year actually kind of almost hurts them in a weird way this year, right? Because last year, maybe you definitely caught Georgia sleeping a bit. They didn't have Jalen Carter. They weren't quite ready. Like, make no mistake, Georgia's starting to do their Michigan thing, where they're beating the teams that they should be, and they're beating them badly. And it comes at a time when anytime, and I love what Jeffrey Whiteman says in the chat, everyone gets a little jacked up to try and upset the champ. That's true. But what you don't want, you've seen Lord of the Rings, right, Mike? Have you? I hope so. Oh yeah. Obviously. Many times. You never want the full eye of Sauron focused on you. You want it distracted. Right. You want to watch in the battle outside the back gates. You can sneak the ring into Mount Doom behind him. And unfortunately for Mizzou, they are going into Mordor, and Sauron knows. Like, there is no sneak attack here. He is fully aware, and Kirby Smart's eye is fully trained on Eli Drinkwitz, Luther Burden, and Brady Cook. And if you're Brady Cook, he was so good to start against LSU, but a couple of crucial mistakes are all that made the difference in that game. And it's just very hard for me to see him avoiding those against what is ostensibly the best team in the entire country. So it's going to be a massive weekend in the SEC. Cannot wait. Playoff rankings coming to our, like I said, guys, turkey season is championship season. This is where championships are forged. When we get back, the world's largest outdoor cocktail party is on the move. We got some ideas on where it should be played. Keep it locked right here on Rivals. Welcome back to Rivals Down South. Trenton Bradshaw. Remember, youtube.com/watchstadium. Trenton Bradshaw. Am I the only one that sees Washington as the Oklahoma of the Pac-12? They got lucky against Oregon, but they're looking weaker every week. I'm still a Washington believer, Mike, but I think Trenton does raise a very good point. Both teams appear to be heading in similar directions where they won the massive early test, but the team they beat seems to be appreciating, well, they seem to be heading the wrong direction. I'd be terrified right now if I was a Brent Venables fan.
Yeah, I mean, Sooners did a great job beating themselves last weekend. Pick six, multiple turnovers. But, hey, massive turnaround still. Everything's still in front of them. I get where he's going with that, but still an opportunity. And I don't think you can completely write off the Sooners. I'm still on the bandwagon.
All right, so we mentioned the world's largest outdoor cocktail party taking place this weekend. It's in Jacksonville, of course, and Mike, I know we're both a fan of movies. This new Jacksonville stadium that they're building looks a bit straight out of sci-fi. It looks fantastic. It feels like a city desperate to keep its team from flirting with the wiles of London. Who knows whether or not it holds the Jags back, but in the future, it's going to be awesome for Georgia, Florida. The question is, though, over the next couple of years, while these renovations are done, they need somewhere to play. Where would you want to see this game be played?
Well, they can't go anywhere worse if you want to talk about field conditions. That was just a travesty over the weekend. I can't believe they did that. But, hey, they call it the world's largest outdoor cocktail party. What about Portland, world's largest craft beer party? I mean, because I don't think this is fair playing in Florida. I really don't. And I don't think it'd be fair playing in Atlanta either.
I mean, yeah, look, this is one of those deals. Maybe you just do what Kirby says and you just have it and do like a traditional home to home. I know that's boring. That's where I would maybe end up going, simply because for once, it might actually be cool to watch this game in the Swamp, or it might be cool to watch it in Athens. But I want to be painfully clear about this. Screw Kirby and his killing the neutral site every single year. I vehemently disagree. I think it's great for Jacksonville. I love these college games where we have the true 50-50 crowd split. I don't want Kirby to have any more recruiting juice. He doesn't need another home game to recruit on. Screw you, Kirby. Get the hell out of here. So no, long-term, keep it in Jacksonville. Short-term, you want to go home and home, whatever. Or, do it at a baseball field or something maybe. I don't know. Mike, thank you so much. As always, that SEC podcast, the highest rated SEC podcast on Apple. Check out Mike and Cousin Shane there. This is Rivals Down South. We'll be back tomorrow with more college football talk. Love ya.